Chapter 21 Broken. As I stepped out of the portal, dim light illuminated the shallow cave-like chamber. The rocky terrain crunched underfoot, and ahead a narrow slit in the stone opened to the outside, where Keenan and Throm were already cautiously peering out. I joined them and surveyed the landscape. It was a nightmarish expanse of jagged blackened stone and molten rivers that snaked through the earth like fiery veins. Towering spires of basalt jutted from the cracked ground, their surfaces scorched and pitted by relentless centuries of heat. The air was thick with ash, choking and heavy, making each breath a struggle. Waves of searing heat shimmered across the landscape, distorting the world into a hellish mirage. Explosions of molten rock burst from deep fissures, sending glowing embers spiraling into a smog-choked sky. A dull red glow lit everything from below, cast by countless pits of fire that burned across the surface. The ground trembled with distant rumbles, like the world itself groaned under the weight of ancient infernal forces. Massive stone structures, ruined fortresses perhaps, stood half-sunken in the volcanic waste, their cracked walls inscribed with glowing runes that pulsed faintly. Deep tunnels and cave mouths gaped from the rocks, magma veins illuminated their insides like open furnaces. This world was alive with fire and death, an unforgiving wasteland. Lily came up beside me, unconsciously grabbing my hand. Staring at the infernal landscape, she murmured, "Man, this is hard for me to breathe in. I can't imagine what it's like for you guys." I smiled and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "You ready?" I whispered. She looked up at me, her fiery grin returning. "Yeah, let's go find some furniture." I chuckled, shaking my head. Behind us, Rieger approached quietly, his eyes fixed on the burning hellscape. "I never imagined a place like this could exist," he murmured. I nodded, then turned. "So what do you think, Throm? Which way?" Throm scanned the landscape thoughtfully. "I'm not sure." To our left, a massive stone structure was built into the side of a cave wall, part castle, part barracks maybe, judging by its shape. Faint lights flickered in its windows, and glowing runes shimmered across its crumbling walls. Ahead and slightly right, a jagged outcropping overlooked a field of bubbling lava flows, bordered by towering stone pillars. Further right, a much smaller ruined building sat surrounded by scattered debris, too far to identify what it had once been. Rieger squinted. "I think we're less likely to run into trouble if we go right, but we can't be sure." "We could split up and cover more ground," Keenan suggested. Throm shook his head. "Normally I'd agree, but here that's not a risk I'm willing to take." "All right then," Lily said. "Right it is. But I want to check out that outcropping first. We might get a better view." Without hesitation, she hopped down from our cave's ledge onto what looked like a path, or at least one free of lava. She waved us forward. "Come on, you slowpokes. There's furniture ain't gonna break itself." I smiled and followed, landing beside her. Keenan and Rieger dropped down behind me. Throm lingered, his gaze still fixed on the old fortress. "Come on, Throm," I called. He blinked and shook his head as if clearing a fog. "Right," he muttered before jumping down. But as we moved towards the outcropping, he cast one last look back at the ruined stronghold before following, as if being called to it. We advanced carefully. As we neared the outcropping, the faint sound of voices drifted through the heat-hazed air, muffled and indistinct. Rieger held up a hand, motioning for silence, then crept ahead, disappearing behind a cluster of rocks. We crouched low and waited. It didn't take long. A few moments later, Rieger returned, shaking his head and motioning for us to follow. As we caught up, he whispered, "You're not going to believe this." We rounded a massive boulder and saw them. 4 figures were tied to large stones. One was a man with the head of an elephant. Another was a small frog-like creature. The third was a minotaur, although unlike any I'd seen before, more mythic than real. And the last was a human. They were quietly bickering among themselves. The human turned to the minotaur, huffing. "You can't just charge in every time. You could at least wait for me to play a tune or something, amp you guys up a little." The elephant man rumbled, "Hey, lay off him. How could we have known this was going to happen?" The frog spat on the ground. "Man, I knew you guys were going to get me killed. This place is drying me out. I can barely get my poison flowing." Throm stepped forward. "Excuse me." The 4 captives froze mid-argument and stared at us. "Great," the human muttered. "Now I'm hallucinating." The frog blinked. "Nope, I think those guys might be real." The minotaur grunted. The elephant-headed man muttered, "I should have just stayed with the cat lady exploring that old library. Would have been way better than this." Keenan, thoroughly confused, asked, what are you doing here? Lily rolled her eyes. Nice, Keenan. Top-tier questioning. 10 out of 10. The group stared at us for a long moment, then the human burst into laughter. Oh, you're serious, he said mockingly. Well, you see, we went out for a picnic, and this seemed like just the spot. We stared at him. Sorry, Keenan muttered. The elephant-headed man sighed. Please forgive my friend. It's been a rough day. But if you could release us, we would be grateful. I looked at Throm, who shrugged. Lily did the same. Then she stepped forward and cut the elephant man's bonds. You seem all right, she said, but you can cut your friends loose. That way, if we have to kill them, it's not on me. She turned and walked back towards us. Nice touch, I said, shaking my head. She shrugged. What? Now they won't attack. They'll be too scared. Keenan frowned. Yeah, that's not how that works. She smirked. Always worked for me. We shook our heads as the elephant man freed the others. So can we get your names? I asked. The elephant man looked at the human, who quickly shook his head. Better not. Why? I asked. The less we know about each other, the better if we get captured again, he shrugged. You could come with us, Keenan offered. Nope, the human said. We need to get back to our world, and I need to get my loop back, he groaned. Ugh, they better not have damaged it. The frog muttered under his breath. Might poison him next time. What was that? The human snapped. The frog just stared at him. Well, thanks for the help, the elephant man said. But we've got to go. He turned and started down the path from where we'd come. The Minotaur approached Lily, towering over her. He placed one hand over his chest and gave a slight bow. Ah, she said, manners. She mimicked the gesture, and he nodded before following the elephant man. The frog sprang after them, leaping onto the Minotaur's shoulder. The human lingered for a moment, watching his companion as if weighing a decision. Then he turned back to us. Look, he said, you want some advice? Don't get captured. Better to die. His voice faded, and then he turned and jogged after the others. We watched them vanish into the distance. Throm finally broke the silence. I really would have liked to know who they are and where they came from. Yeah, Keenan agreed. And how did that guy get an elephant's head? Right? Lily added. But they had a talking frog. How cute is that? I laughed. Glad you didn't say that to his face. Keenan smirked. Now I kind of wish she'd had. With that, we continued toward the other building. As we approached it, we spread out cautiously, edging towards the entrance. Rieger slipped ahead and vanished inside. Moments later, he reappeared, held up 2 fingers, and pointed towards the door. Throm entered first, Keenan close behind, while Rieger peeled off to scout the perimeter. Lily picked up a broken shield, frowning as she turned it in her hands. I followed Keenan and Throm inside. It looked like an alchemy lab. Potions, papers, spellbooks, and reagents scattered in chaotic disarray. Several cots lined the walls, each showing signs of struggle. One had been torn apart as if someone had been dragged from it. Keenan shook his head as he passed the ruined bed. This place. At the back of the room, a wide doorway loomed. Just as Throm stepped toward it, a teenage boy burst through, nearly impaling himself on Throm's blade. Grab him, Throm shouted. Keenan lunged, but the boy slipped past. I stepped in front of the door and caught him in a bear hug. He thrashed and kicked, shouting, Let me go! Suddenly, something slammed into my head. Wings fluttered frantically as sharp claws raked across my face. A shrill voice screeched, Let him go! I winced as blood trickled down my cheek. Guys, a little help here? Keenan was already grappling with the attacker, while Throm placed a calming hand on the boy's shoulder. Almost instantly, the teen stopped struggling. His breathing slowed. Throm gently lifted his chin. Galen? The boy blinked. Throm? Keenan, still fending off the winged assailant, paused. Wait, Galen, is that really you? The boy turned toward him, eyes wide. Keenan? You're here too? I knew you'd come, but what took so long? Throm studied him, concern deepening the lines on his face. The boy's expression shifted, growing distant. Please don't hurt him, Keenan, he said softly, glancing at the creature Keenan pulled from my face. Keenan sighed and released it. An imp, though far smaller than the ones we'd fought back in Grissom. It flapped over to Galen, landing beside him and puffing up his tiny chest in a show of attempted intimidation. You better not hurt him, the imp squeaked. He's been through enough. Galen suddenly looked at the imp, fear creeping into his eyes. His hands trembled. Wait, they're illusions, aren't they? He whispered. They're not real. The imp frowned. Nope, they're real, he said, glancing at the blood still trickling down my face. Yeah, thanks for that, I muttered, wiping it away with a weak chuckle. Galen turned back to Throm, his composure crumbling. We tried to be strong, but it's been years since you were here, and they hurt us. His voice trembled, panic flared in his eyes. Shh, Throm said gently, kneeling and placing a firm hand on his shoulder. Let me take a look at you. The imp zipped around anxiously. What are you doing? You better not hurt him. Throm met the imp's gaze, calm and steady. I'm helping him forget the last few days, or at least the worst of it. As Throm's magic worked, Galen blinked, his eyes clearing. A slow smile spread across his face. Oh man, I knew you guys would come. He reached down and scratched the imp's oversized ears. Hey, I named this little guy Aegis. He helped me. He frowned. Well, shucks, I don't remember, but I'm sure he did, he laughed, still affectionately scratching the imp. Throm knelt beside them, and he said gently, Thank you for helping this boy. I am in your debt. If there's anything you need, just ask. The imp crossed his arm and huffed. Yeah, I got something. Get us the heck out of here. Throm smiled. That I think we can do. Wait, the imp said, eyeing him warily. You're not going to torture me when we get to your place, are you? Of course not, Keenan said, stepping in with a reassuring tone. The imp turned on him, eyes widening. Huh, a Noctari that turned, he grinned. That's going to make the boss real mad, he chuckled. Keenan frowned. What do you mean? The imp shrugged. He doesn't like it when we switch sides. But I hate it here. Everyone's cruel, and they all hurt each other. He shook his head. No way to live. Throm glanced at him. So Galen calls you Aegis, huh? Oh yes, the imp puffed out his tiny chest with pride. I saved him and he gave me that name. Said there was a great warrior, one of his heroes, who had a shield and was called Aegis. Throm smiled. He was probably reading one of our old history books. That name goes back centuries. The imp shook his head. Nope. He said he watched him train, said that one day that warrior would come save him, and I would come along when he did. Throm looked over at Keenan, who was visibly struggling to hold back tears. I placed a hand on his shoulder as he took a deep breath. Softly, Keenan murmured, I'm sorry I couldn't get here sooner, little buddy. Galen shook his head. I'm sorry, guys. It's the weirdest thing. I can't remember anything from the last 3 days. He let out a small laugh. But I know 2 things for sure. This little guy here is my best friend, and you guys were always going to come for us. And now you're here. His face lit up with certainty. Galen leaned towards the imp and whispered, See? That's him. And that's his shield, he said, pointing to Keenan's back. The imp's eyes widened. Whoa, he breathed. So cool. Yeah, Galen said with a firm nod. So cool for sure. Throm stood and looked at me and Keenan. He's badly broken, but he'll heal in time. We both nodded, trying not to think about what happened to the poor boy. Throm turned back to the imp. Where are the others? The imp bounced nervously. What do you mean, the others? The others they brought here. Like him, Throm clarified, nodding toward Galen. The imp looked around, as if searching for an answer. Galen spoke up instead. They should be back at the island, I think. I don't even know how I got here, to be honest, but Master Eldrin said we needed to prepare, and we were just about to leave for somewhere safe. They could be there, he shrugged. Then with a spark of excitement, Galen turned to the imp. Wait till we get back, and we'll show you how paladins fight. The imp, only just beginning to grasp what Throm's magic had done to Galen's memory, nodded slowly. Yeah, that would be great, he said quietly. Throm's gaze hardened. The others, he pressed again, looking directly at the imp. The imp hesitated, his eyes falling to the ground. I'm not strong or powerful, he said softly. I could only save one. Throm turned and slammed his fist into the wall, gritting his teeth. He didn't speak, but the strain in his posture said enough. Keenan backed up until he hit the wall and slowly slid down to the floor, burying his face in his hands. I didn't know what to say. The odds had been low from the start, but this crushed whatever hope was left. As I struggled to find words, Galen walked over to Keenan and placed a small hand on his shoulder. Don't be sad, he said gently, smiling. I'm sure you guys did everything you could to help, whoever it was you were trying to save. So don't be sad. You're going to help save the world and stop the demons. Keenan looked up through his tears, forcing a smile. Well, looks like we were able to save at least one, he said, glancing at the imp, with the help of a new friend. Galen gasped. Wait, my little buddy helped you guys too? That's awesome. Yep, the imp said, grinning. And now we're going back home. You can show me all that cool stuff you told me about. Throm, still facing away, shook his head with a dry laugh. That's not how I saw my week going, he muttered. Standing in a demon realm, with the hammer and anvil, being confronted by the one we came to save, and the one doing the comforting is an imp who hates demons in a torture lab. You can't make this stuff up. I chuckled. You should write a book about it. Throm laughed under his breath. I might if I make it through this. You better, I said, smiling. We shared a brief, bittersweet laugh just as Lily burst in, breathless, her eyes wide with urgency. There's a patrol coming, she hissed, her voice filled with urgency. The moment of fragile levity shattered. Weapons were drawn, hearts hardened, and the air thickened as we waited for whatever to come.